Hi there, I'm Logan Medish, and this is High Caliber History. Today we're going to take a look at a brief biographical sketch of Christopher Spencer and his influence on the arms industry. On January 14th, 1922, Spencer passed away at the home of his son Roger in Hartford, Connecticut. He had accomplished a lot in his 88 years, but the most impressive was securing a military contract for his gun by walking into the White House with an example of the gun, disassembling it in the president's office, and then shooting it with the president on the National Mall near the Washington Monument. By today's standards, that story is a lot crazy, but that's exactly what Spencer did with President Abraham Lincoln and Secretary Edwin Stanton in August of 1863. Born in 1833, Spencer's first jobs were in machine shops for silk mills and locomotive factories. He cut his teeth on firearms design in Hartford at Colt's factory, but he had developed an interest in guns as a young boy because of his grandfather, who was a gunsmith and veteran of the American Revolution. By 1860, Spencer had secured a patent for a repeating rifle. With the nation on the brink of the Civil War, the timing for his design was perfect, but bureaucratic red tape hampered him at every turn. He secured a government contract with the Navy not long after the war had begun in 1861, but it was just for a paltry 700 rifles, despite having connections with Navy Yard Commander John Dahlgren, Navy Secretary Gideon Welles, and General Ulysses S. Grant. The real roadblock was General James Ripley, who regarded all repeaters as newfangled gimcracks. And so that is why Spencer went right to the top in 1863 and showed President Lincoln the gun personally. Impressed with the repeater, the president's endorsement opened the gates. By the end of the war, more than 100,000 Spencer repeating rifles had been made. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to keep the company afloat, and Spencer went bankrupt in 1868. The following year, Oliver Winchester acquired the company's remaining assets. Spencer was, at that time, employed at Sylvester Roper's arms company, but it too soon went belly up. Undeterred, Christopher continued to think up new inventions and tinker around with various gun designs. By 1882, he had formed another arms company and was making a 5-shot slide-action shotgun of his own design. Most were chambered in 12-gauge, but a few were chambered for 10-gauge shot shells. Standard guns had plain walnut furniture, and deluxe models were available with checkering. There was also a very brief military contract for just 600 guns. By 1890, the business was unsustainable, and Spencer sold his patent rights to Francis Bannerman in 1890. Bannerman, who is today known as the godfather of milsurp, made the guns with his own markings on them until 1907. Despite his less than stellar track record as a businessman, Spencer's designs are well regarded today for their ingenuity and have earned well-deserved places in the homes of gun collectors. Even though he didn't find himself to be independently wealthy from his arms ventures, his other inventions served him quite well. A patent on a machine to automate the manufacture of screws provided the money that he needed to retire and continue tinkering with firearms and other concepts that interested him, namely steam-powered automobiles. Around 1904, he made 10 steam cars for a New York dairy, their power being generated by kerosene. Even in his old age, Spencer kept busy. The 1920 census lists him as an employed engineer at the age of 86, and he was working right up until his death on January 14, 1922. Spencer is buried in his family plot in Palisado Cemetery. Well, that's all I've got for you in a brief biographical sketch about Christopher Spencer. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about him and his designs and his background, and I hope it's inspired you to learn a little bit more about him and the firearms that he was involved with. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode of High Caliber History.